This is Midrash Rabbah from Parshat Miketz, and it's entitled, Why Did Yoseph Force the Egyptians to Undergo Circumcision? Now, this is something that you, of course, won't find any hint of in the Torah, and the Midrash tells the story that when people ran out of grain and came begging, Yoseph, save our lives, we're starving, we need grain, he said, nothing doing unless you do circumcision. And they went to Paro and they said, you won't believe what happened. We ran out of food. And Paro said, why did you run out of food? Don't you know that this, famine is coming? I understand if you don't have 7 years of food, but you should have 1 or 2 years. And here we just started. You already ran out of food. And they said, you don't understand, Paro. Everything just rotted. Everything, what we had stored, what we had around in the kitchen, it all rotted. So then Paro said, okay, seems like Yoseph has some kind of powers over the sustainability of grain. So you better do what he said. If he wants you to get circumcised, get circumcised. Otherwise, he could curse all the grain in the whole country, and then we'll all starve. Okay, very bizarre. Now, one of the big questions that you have to ask, and the commentary of Fedor does ask this, is what do you have to gain by giving them circumcision? It's not conversion. It's something that you're forcing them to do. They don't want to do it. They're not doing it for the right reasons. They're going to continue doing idolatry. They're going to continue doing all kinds of sexual immorality. So what exactly you gain? Why do Yosef try to force this upon them? So the Feitor comes up with 3 answers. The first answer is that he was trying to sort of normalize this behavior in Egypt. People thought that, the Egyptians thought that Yosef had this bizarre practice that he was circumcised, and they looked upon it with great scorn, and Yosef was either trying to get revenge at them, or perhaps better, that he wanted to take away the stigma which he was anticipating that, the Jews would come down to Egypt, all the children of Yaakov, and they would try to integrate into society. And if they saw that there was such scorn of the Egyptians for circumcision, they might stop doing circumcision. So he wanted to sort of normalize the behavior. Ironically, we learned in Midrash and Chuma that they did indeed stop doing circumcision for that very reason. The second reason talks about this idea that circumcision somehow lowers the pleasure of sexuality, and maybe it will cause the Egyptians not to, be so involved in sexual immorality. It sounds a little bit like the Klei Yakar on the Torah, who says that grain actually rots because of some part of the sheaf that's extra that makes the rest rot, and so the foreskin is also some kind of something extra that brings kind of rotten morality, and in any ways that both of these are related, that he was trying to actually change the morality of Egypt. And the last answer, interestingly enough, is that he thought that it would be an impediment, that having circumcision is an impediment for men to convert, and in the future Egyptians might want to convert, and if they have already undergone circumcision, then psychologically it won't be so traumatic, and they will consider it. Of course, this leaves us with a lot of questions, and I guess the biggest question in my mind is, already I wondered whether there was a backlash by the fact that a Jew, Yosef, was helping to enslave the Egyptians. One day the Egyptians would enslave the Jews. And now you have a Jew, Yosef, who's not only enslaving them, but forcing them to do something that they consider to be abhorrent. So perhaps that's going to cause even greater backlash. So what's going on here? So I had some ideas, but I'm very open to more ideas. One thought I had was, Yosef had a tradition. He knew that the Jews were going to come down, be enslaved. He had a tradition from Abraham, and they would be let go with a mighty hand, meeting great miracles and the plagues and God controlling nature. And of course, nature was something that people, idolaters worshipped. So perhaps, linking back to one of the answers of Fetohar, he actually saw that these 10 plagues and these miracles will cause Egyptians to convert when they see these open miracles, and again, removing this psychological barrier that they already had, the circumcision would actually enable them to convert. Another point I'd like to bring up is something that I purposely left out before. The Midrash says that when they came to Paro and said, we're starving, we need grain, not only did he say to get circumcised, he said something amazingly audacious. He said, my God does not sustain people who are not circumcised. So, in Hebrew it's called arelim. So if you want my God to sustain you, you better get circumcised. Now this seems like an unbelievably bold statement for someone who is a minority of one in the most powerful nation in the world to get up and quote from his God and command people to get circumcised. How do we make any sense of that? So I was thinking perhaps in that question is an answer. If you put all the facts together, you see an amazing irony here. You have the Egyptians who really loathe Yosef. Of course, from later on the Chumash that, the Ivrim, those from the other side of the other bank, you're not allowed to even eat with them. It's a toeva, it's an abomination to eat with Jews. So you could see what a disgust they had for these Ivrim, and here the guy that they hold in such low esteem, and especially because he is circumcised, he's the guy who single-handedly is going to save the entire nation, entire world from starvation. And where is he drawing his power from? Well, that's clear. Yosef doesn't hide that at all. He's always says, but when he was interpreting Paro's dream, he said it was he's getting it from God, from his God. And so if you, as we said before, the Egyptians and Paro thought he had these kind of secret powers that he could, curse the grain and make it rot, and they were all afraid of him, and his powers were coming from God, perhaps Yosef reasoned, hey, let me just, run with this. If it's my God that's saving your land, and you hold me so loathsome, well, guess what? My God has one demand in order to give me the powers to do this, and that is that you get circumcised. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, we can go back to some of the other reasons, for the future and for the Jews coming and for the Egyptians that may want to be converting. All that other stuff could come to play, but perhaps Yosef was just taking advantage of this, crazy Egyptian mindset that on the one hand, they hate this guy, on the other hand, he's saving their life, and he can make demands of them, which they're used to gods making demands, and since he has his particular God that wants this particular ritual, why not? So the last thing I want to mention is that, there is another way to look at Midrash always. There's always this running debate whether you have to take something literally or not. So I was talking to Rabbi Shammai Siskin here in Achlot, and he mentioned, well, what does Yosef stand for? Of course, we call him Yosef HaTzadik because he stands for fighting all kind of sexual immorality, like the wife of Potiphar, and he actually, when he revealed himself to his brothers, he showed them his Brit Milah, so for him, this sexual immorality is a very strong thing, and maybe the Midrash is simply trying to say that having somebody so powerful in the government in such a critical role of saving their life and yet leading a moral life was such an impressive role model to them. It's almost as if he was circumcising them. And really the Midrash only meant that this was a powerful icon that Yosef was in the Egyptian world and shook them up in terms of their value system. And that's really what the Midrash meant by wanting to circumcise them. Have a great Shabbat.